Welcome to the C60 Health Connections show, where we meet with leading experts in the health and wellness space to help you uncover insights to support your healthy aging goals. My name is Jessica McNaughton, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at C60 Purple Power. I am a businesswoman with years of experience in corporate America. For more than 20 years, I've been exploring various modalities in health, wellness, and spirituality. I love learning, connecting, and helping people. On today's show, we're going to deep dive with Brett Hawes, a functional medicine leader with expertise in detox, gut health, and autoimmune issues. Stick around to learn how you can avoid getting sick this year in the first place. Also with us today is Ken Swartz, who is the founder and chief science officer at C60 Purple Power. So Ken will be providing some insight into a super antioxidant called carbon 60. Now, before we get started, these statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. Any products or topics discussed today are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. All right, so let's get started. Brett, Ken, good to see you both.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just provided a quick, intro to you, but your resume is quite impressive. Do you want to just give our listeners a quick intro, a little bit more insight into your background?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll give you the potted bio, the elevator pitch. For me, I got into the health and wellness in like the scene, basically, actually through more of the spiritual realms. So I've lived a lot. I've lived with indigenous people in various places in the world. I lived with First Nations people here in Canada for 6.5 years. And that kind of like thrust me into more of the nutrition world. And then, of course, from there, just deep dived into things like Ayurvedic medicine, detoxification, iridology. But I always tell people, the core things that I really do on a day-to-day basis in my clinic are really functional medicine and clinical nutrition. And then everything else kind of orbits around that, whether it's shamanic medicine, whether it's herbs, whether it's homeopathy, and so forth. So I always tell people my toolkit is really, really wide. And in addition to the clinical side of things, I do actually teach at one of Canada's top schools for nutrition. So I've been a faculty member there for, I think, 14 years now, somewhere around there. So I coach and train health professionals and practitioners as well, both in the business side of things and then also in the actual craft as well.
That's awesome. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. We met many months ago based on your interest in carbon 60, and I'm just thrilled to have you. So thank you for being with us today. So what do you think people need to know right now about gut health and digestive health?
If you go back into ancient healing modalities like Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, they always talk about your chi, your chi or your agni, right? That digestive fire. And so we've actually known for thousands of years, I think as long as human beings have actually been writing, we've known that digestion is kind of central to absolutely everything. And without, if you just consider from a physiological standpoint, that 60% of your energy in your whole body is reserved just for your digestive system. And of course, the research now that's coming out, the connections between gut and brain health, for example, if we'll probably touch on autoimmune disease at some point, but pretty much everyone with autoimmune disease has something going on in their gut, whether it be food allergies and sensitivities, leaky gut infections, and so on. So, the bottom line is without actually restoring and optimizing digestive function, it's very, very difficult to help seemingly unrelated health conditions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So for people, if there's anybody who's listening to this and it's their first time like hearing about gut health, how do they start? Like if you haven't been on this path and you're just stumbling across this today, where's the first place to start?
I mean, I think a lot of people are very confused about nutrition these days.
Yeah.
We've got paleo and we've got keto and then we've got carnivore and I should be vegan and plant-based. And I always say to people, before you even go down any of those roads, the number one thing you can do is actually just clean up your diet. That's the first step, so no matter what ratios or proportions or types of food you're eating, if you actually just cut down and cut out the processed foods, that's a huge first step. Of course, cutting out sugar, artificial dyes, flavors, colors, all that sort of stuff that's just the first step of anything, really.
Yeah.
And then the basic things, just consuming more water. I've had people in clinic that drink like 1 cup of water a whole day.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So staying
and then
hydrated
they're
is
kind
really
of wondering
important.
why they're constipated and why they have these issues. And I'm like, well, you're supposed to drink 2 to 3 liters of water a day. So you're kind of falling quite short on that,
Yeah. For those of us in America who don't know how to convert, to a liter, Ken, can you help us with that question? How much water is that in the U.S.?
A gallon is 3.7 liters.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so just shy of a gallon.
A gallon a day.
Okay.
Yeah,
Somewhere between a
give or
half
take,
gallon and a gallon. If you're doing that, you're going to have movement in your system.
Yeah, or 8 to 10 glasses of water.
Okay. Okay.
So that would be around an 8-ounce glass of water.
Okay. Great.
So somewhere around there.
Okay. So are there foods that people should be eating to help support gut health?
Yeah, I think the ones that really pop to mind would be, I always say to people, get a variety, right? So get a variety of things. Your body needs a bit of everything. It needs proteins, it needs fats, it needs carbohydrates. So from a digestive standpoint, though, I think that increasing your fiber intake from fruits, vegetables, whole grains, of course, there's debate about all of these things. But again, for someone just coming off a McDonald's or KFC type of diet, I think just starting with fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, legumes, and whole foods is really a first step. And then the second thing from there, we've just seen such a huge resurgence with fermented foods. So things like sauerkraut, for example, yogurts and that sort of stuff. They have a lot of good bacteria in them, which really help to support what's called your microbiome, which is the bacterial colony that basically lives inside of you in your gut. Okay.
So what about probiotics?
So yeah, that's obviously a great segue into that. Probiotics, we've identified over 1,000 strains of different bacteria that live in your gut. And most of them are actually beneficial. We do have some that are, potentially harmful if they get out of control. But with probiotics, probiotics are really, it's just another name for good bacteria or friendly bacteria. And so I always say to people, we need to have around 85% of the good bacteria and around 15% of the bad bacteria. So that balance, they kind of keep each other in check. But what we see, because people are over consuming sugar, they're overdoing it on prescription antibiotics. There's certain chemicals in our environment and our food. So we've got a lot of things that are working against us that are actually killing off the good bacteria. And what that does is it leaves the bad bacteria to kind of grow over. And that's where we start seeing things like candida, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and some of these other things.
Okay. So if some of our audience members are experiencing some of those issues, Brett, what are the top 3 things these individuals should do to address this issue right now? And Ken, I'm going to ask you the same question in just a minute as well.
I think the first thing, I always say I approach practice and I teach practitioners what's called a 5R approach to health. So that's just general health. And the first R is actually remove. So I find that what a lot of people do is they're eating all of these foods that are aggravating their condition, whatever that is, right? So if you have candida, for example, which is a yeast overgrowth, the big things you want to cut out is sugar. That's like number one. So sugar, alcohol, beer and wine are especially problematic. You find that wheat and gluten aggravates that as well. So you want to basically remove these things so that you stop feeding the yeast or the bacteria or whatever it is. And I think a lot of people forget that because they just kind of keep eating the things that are aggravating them. And then they keep wondering, what do I add?
That's
right. So
true.
now we're taking like boatloads of supplements and we're eating a bit of broccoli and telling ourselves, well, is the broccoli good for us? So the first R is always remove. Okay. And then the second R is going to be replace. And so we might look at, again, as I said earlier, replacing processed foods with whole foods. Okay, so that's one example. Replacing our, things in our diet with probiotic foods, with fermented foods, and that sort of thing. And I think that's a good, that's a good 101, basic step that you can do. And from there, you can kind of, go off the deep end and decide supplementation wise and everything else that you would like to do.
I love that. So what I heard you say was like remove sugar, remove the alcohol, replace processed foods with whole foods, and drink water. So just simple, basic stuff to get started.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think people just forget about the basics. We live in a world that's so saturated with information that it just takes 5 minutes on Google and you're down some rabbit hole trying to piece all of it together. So I think people really need to just get back to the basics there. Yeah. And it's a good start.
Awesome. Ken, what about you? I know you've got a similar, a similar perspective with a different background. What other healthy lifestyle choices do you think are really important for people to integrate into their life in order to support gut health?
Well, there's several of them. I think in going with removing, one of the other things I kind of talk about is seed oils. The human body is not designed to digest seed oils. They're way too big in omega-6s, and all they do is cause inflammation. I mean, if you go look at your salad dressing, canola oil, cottonseed oil, and then you've got sesame seed oil, you've got peanut oil, there's all of those seed oils. They really need to go. That's important. The other thing is I think that I always talk about is supplementation. There's a lot of the food that we have now, even the vegetables and fruits, they're kind of, the soils have been really mined because they're, synthetic chemicals to fertilize. So a lot of what people, and of course, some of the plants have been bred to produce a lot of vegetable matter, but they really don't have the nutrients like they used to. So a good multivitamin, multi-mineral supplement is important. And then the other thing that I always talk about is you need to take extra amounts of vitamin D and K. And they're just, people are just way down in our society. And then the other one is magnesium. People don't get enough magnesium. And without magnesium, you can't process calcium. Most people get enough calcium or have, that have calcium problems, have enough calcium in their bodies, but they don't have the other nutrients like magnesium, vitamin D, and a few others. And so those are just, there's just simple things, of course. And also the other thing is exercise. Those are probably the three that I would really push as something to add.
So avoid seed oils, supplement specifically with, vitamin D, K, magnesium, make sure you're getting those, and exercise. I love it. And Ken, what's your favorite source of vitamin D?
Well, actually sunlight would be the best source of vitamin D. Years ago, I was a teacher. And when I first started teaching, my supervising teacher or whatever sent me down and gave me a bottle of vitamin D and said, you need to take this because you're working in a germ factory. And he says, the reason people get sick in the wintertime is because you're inside. You're wearing heavy clothes when you're outside. You're inside. You're not, it's fluorescent lights. You're not getting the vitamin D you need, and that's what's going to make you sick. And so if you take the vitamin D, you're going to stay healthy working in this germ factory.
Yeah, I love that. We all need to get more sunshine. So guys, let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about detox. This is a subject that Brett knows very well. So Brett, why is detox important and who should detox?
Well, first of all, everyone should detox at some point. And I would say not even at some point, at least once a year, go on some type of detox. And the reason why, it's very simple. If you just take a look at the world we live in nowadays, it's very different from the world we lived in 100 years ago. So we've got a lot of synthetic chemicals. We've got more air pollution. We've got a lot more stress, stressors on the body. So even things like electromagnetic frequencies and just modern living, these things all have a compounded effect on our bodies and increase something that's called the allostatic load. And the allostatic load is really just your total body burden, right? So it comprises not only the toxins that you would, think of, but it also comprises your genetics, your personal history, your mental and emotional health, all of these things together. And so basically we're just overloaded and bombarded with toxins. I've run so many toxicology profiles on people in clinic, and I've yet to see someone that's come back with none. Wow. So what these toxins do, the short end of the story is most toxins are fat soluble. So what they'll do is that it makes it very easy for them to accumulate in our body. So in our fatty tissues, and some of the fattiest tissues that we have in our body, aside from our brain, is actually going to be the glands of the body. So the endocrine system, or the glands of the body, which make all of our hormones. So you'll find that a lot of people with hormonal issues and hormonal imbalances often have a high toxic load. So that's really why. And of course, we see toxicity is an issue in pretty much all chronic degenerative disease. I think when people think of toxins, sometimes they think of getting poisoned. Right. It's like I had an acute exposure to something. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about long-term accumulation of toxins over the course of one's life. And, these toxins can be chemicals, they can be molds. I'm seeing a lot of mold problems nowadays, pesticides and chemical residues from farming. So
it's in our food, it's in our air, it's in our water. We're just getting bombarded and exposed all the time because of our modern environment. So how does someone detox? Again, if somebody on the show has never done a detox, where do you start?
Well, I think the first thing is, just like we said with the 5R approach, you got to remove, right? So, cleaning up your water supply, investing in a good quality water filter is a good first step. Switching over your diet to be hopefully 100% organic, or at least predominantly organic, so that you don't have the Roundup and you don't have these chemicals that are in the food. One of the exercises I taught nutrition and the environment for many years. And I put all of my students through an exercise where they had to go through their house and they had to take out all of their personal care products, their cleaning products, and actually had to write down all of the ingredients on the products. And of course, because it was in a school setting, I would say now write a 20-page essay on a few of the chemicals, and people were always so shocked to just find out what was in their home. So if you can start by cleaning up your personal care products, your shampoos, your toothpastes and stuff like that, and then of course filtering your water, your diet, an air filter as well if you live in a place that's maybe more prone to mold. And even if you have something like seasonal allergies or you suffer from hay fever and stuff, an air filter is a really, really good investment to just filter out a lot of those allergens. So I think that's probably point number one, if you will, from the remove side of things. Is that good enough, or do you want to talk about actual strategies to detoxify the body?
I think those are really simple things that people can start doing. I think that's great because anybody could take action on that. But I want to ask you a follow-up question when you're talking about hair or toothpaste or beauty products. Like, what are and I also would like you to answer the question about Roundup because some people just might not know. So what are the chemicals that people should be on the lookout for in hair care products or in toothpaste? That's question number one. Yeah. And then the second question would be, tell us more about Roundup.
Yeah. Okay. Well, big topics. I could be here for a long time. So I'll keep it short. Okay. I think what people need to realize with the chemical industry, and let me just say the cosmetics industry, right? The cosmetics industry is essentially a self-regulating industry. They have what's called the Cosmetics Review Board. Okay. Last time I checked, I think there was around 80,000 chemicals that had been approved. But if you wind the clock back, you'll find out that a lot of these things haven't actually been properly tested for safety. They kind of get grandfathered in because they're related to a chemical that was maybe tested in the 60s or something like that. So that's probably good for people to just know, your big box brands of makeup and stuff like that. I mean, just go and start poking around online and you'll find out pretty quickly. So some of the things that come to mind, and really there's thousands of chemicals. I think that parabens are preservatives. There's pretty strong links now between parabens and cancer, particularly breast cancer. I think the other one would be heavy metals. So lead, there's a lot of lead in, particularly in mascara and stuff like that. I think those are probably the biggest ones that I would avoid. You do get things like phthalates, you get PCBs, so there's lots of other things. But we're very blessed these days. When I got into this field 20 years ago, I mean, we kind of had very expensive but very low quality or low functioning products. You know what I mean? Like you'd go to the health food store and it was kind of like more of a granola muncher kind of vibe. And, you'd have some like 4-ingredient product that didn't really work, but it cost like $12. Now there's so many different products on the market that are just great. And, they're quite affordable as well for most people. Second question, which is it's a topic that I've spent a lot of time researching, many, many years. In fact, Roundup is essentially the most widely used agricultural chemical on the planet. Okay, so if you look at all of the chemicals, all of the pesticides, the herbicides, the fertilizers, maybe not fertilizers, but anything that's used to control weeds or pests or anything like that, Roundup accounts for about 65% of that.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. And in the last 10 years, we have sprayed 75% of the Roundup that's ever been made in the history of like planet Earth, right? Okay. So what's happened with Roundup use is it's basically just escalated over the last 10 years. And, there's now, last time I checked, there were well over 1,000 plaintiffs that were ready to sue Monsanto, the maker of Roundup. The ingredient in Roundup, I probably should have said this first, is called glyphosate. So people, if you hear glyphosate and Roundup, they're somewhat interchangeable. Okay. But basically, there's strong links between glyphosate and cancer. That's probably one of the biggest areas. There have now actually been a few, I think 2 that I know of for sure, multi-million-dollar lawsuits that have been won by people who've got cancer because of Roundup, right? But other things, I think, kind of tying into some of the things we spoke about earlier, glyphosate now, even at safe levels, has been shown to disrupt the microbiome in the gut. Okay, so even at acceptable levels, and you can imagine when they do, it's essentially because it's a weed killer.
Yeah.
We thought for the longest time that there's a certain pathway in weeds called the shikimate pathway. Okay, so just to get a little sciencey here, so the shikimate pathway, if you block the shikimate pathway, the plant dies. Okay, it's that simple. And what Monsanto didn't realize was that the bacteria in your gut also have a shikimate pathway. So if we're consuming Roundup through our food supply in a low dose for long periods of time, what that's actually doing is it's disrupting that bacterial balance that we spoke about earlier. And also what we've discovered is that it can actually be a major contributor to leaky gut. Okay, so basically instead of your gut being a nice tight protective barrier, it's a little bit loose, and now you can, that just paves the way for all kinds of problems. So I think those are probably the big ticket items. I mean, there's for sure others, without getting controversial, there's some very strong correlations between Roundup and autism. So there's that as well. And I always say to people, I'm like, we can sit and debate all of the stuff all day long, but the main thing is just get it out of your diet, get it out of your body. It's that simple.
Yeah. So I want to break this down, and I want to get your feedback. So if I'm a farmer and I'm spraying Roundup on a wheat field, and then that wheat is getting, turned into conventional cereals or breads, and now I'm a consumer and I'm buying that at the store, that's where I'm getting that glyphosate into my diet. And so I had a girlfriend the other day ask me, like, why should I eat organic? And so this is a reason for eating organic, because you don't want to have that glyphosate in your food, correct?
Yeah, 100%. And if I can add one thing, because I do feel it's an important topic, is, we've really changed over the last few years, even the way that we use Roundup. So the purpose of Roundup is we genetically engineer plants to withstand Roundup, right? So the idea is that if I spray it on a GMO soy crop, the soy is not going to be affected, but all the other plants will be affected. Okay, so it's going to kill everything. But now what's happened is even with non-genetically modified crops, we've started ramping up a process called desiccation. And so what desiccation is, it's very simple to understand. Traditionally, if I was going to grow chickpeas, for example, right? So chickpeas are not genetically modified. You go to the store and it'll have a non-GMO verified sticker on it.
Yeah.
But what people don't realize is that traditionally you would take those chickpeas, you would harvest them, you would stick them in a silo or a barn of some kind, and then you would basically dry them out, right?
Yeah.
And then once they were dry, you would then process them and get all the beans and off you go. What farmers are doing now is they're actually, instead of drying it in the barn, they're actually killing them in the field with Roundup.
Wow.
Okay, and so what happens is now, because those chickpeas are not genetically modified, they're going to die, right?
Yeah.
So you spray them with the Roundup about 3 or 4 days before harvest. They dry in the field. You then process them. And so what's happening now is we're starting to see increased levels of Roundup even in these foods that are not necessarily genetically modified. And so I think that's why it's so important for people to really eat organic, especially things like grains, beans, and that sort of thing.
Okay. That's super helpful. Ken, I know you use a form of detox quite frequently, and it also helps support the control of your weight. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about your perspective on detox?
Oh, yeah. Well, I use intermittent fasting.
Okay.
And if you think, look at the average, your digestive is very important. And you can't overwork it, because look at the average person. They get up in the morning, they eat at 7 o'clock, they eat a breakfast, then they do it at lunch. You come home at night, maybe you eat late, 7 or 8, and then maybe you're watching late night TV or something and you're having snacks. So you've been working your digestive system, 16, 18 hours in a day.
Yeah.
Well, if you physically tried to work 16 and 18 hours in a day, you'd be exhausted. Well, as Brett pointed out, 60% of your energy goes to the digestive system. So all that, you're just overworking everything in your digestive system. So when you intermittent fast, in my case, I'm getting close to the 6-0, is I'm in like a 4 to 6 hour window.
Okay.
So that's what I eat in. And then I have 18 hours or 20 hours for my digestive system to rest and recover. And it also, when that happens, it also like burn off the glucan in my liver. And so that also stimulates various other actions. So it starts telling my fat cells, hey, you need to dump nutrients into the bloodstream to support the rest of the body. And you kind of get into that thing. And because I tried when I was younger, I'd got a little bit of weight on me. And I tried all things, the 3 whites, white flour, white sugar, did all these other things. And none of them really worked until I did intermittent fasting. And I was able to take my weight back down to when I was in high school. So that's the only effective thing that I found, and it improved my digestion hugely. Now when I eat things, my digestion is just so much better because, it gets that 18 hours of rest. And when I do eat, it's ready to go and do its job.
Great. Brett, what's your take on intermittent fasting?
I mean, I think it's great. To be honest, there's a lot of solid research coming out. I think if you, and again, everyone's a little bit different, but everything that Ken said is pretty much bang on. I think as well, when you kind of double down on intermittent fasting and also have a bit more of a carb restricted kind of diet. So I'm not a huge fan of no carb and low carb. I think it can work for some people, but for women, it's usually quite disastrous. So my advice to people is always, just keeping the carbs in the background and the carbs that you are eating, making sure that they're more complex carbs so that you're getting fibers, that you're not spiking your blood sugar. But then really focusing on protein and fat, because your protein and fat is really going to keep you fuller for longer. They're also, especially fat, is more calorically dense as well. So you can find that you can eat a smaller amount and you still get enough calories in. But what it does is essentially that's what puts you into fat burning mode. People are, as a modern civilization, we're very well trained to eat carbohydrates, right? Carbs are everywhere. Unfortunately, what happens with all the excess carbs, because people are living a sedentary life and not exercising and not moving as much, is all of those excess carbs essentially get turned into fat. And because our bodies are not used to metabolizing fat, we're essentially stuck in carb burning mode and fat storage mode. And so what intermittent fasting and carb restriction does is it essentially flips the switch on that, where you will get put into more fat burning mode. And as Ken said, at the same time, all these other benefits of, cleaning out cellular debris, toxins, improved digestion, et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I know that there's a lot of different types of detox diets out there, and you talk to us about really simple things people can do without buying anything or taking a supplement. How long do you think this removal process of removing things and integrating and replacing whole foods with your processed foods, how long should that process take?
I mean, so it's actually interesting because there's literature on that. There's actual studies on it, right? So usually if you dig into the literature, what you're going to find is anyone who's trying to change their diet particularly, it usually takes them around 2 to 3 months to fully get on it. Because in the beginning, there's going to be all sorts of roadblocks. You're going to cheat, you're going to fall off the wagon, then you're going to get back on. And, that's just normal, right? We're human beings, we're fallible. So I think that, just setting yourself up with micro goals is really the way to go. And so if it's overwhelming. I mean, to think that you got to change your cleaning products, your personal care products, your diet, it's just too much, right? So I always say to people, whenever you run out of something, just switch it up, right? So once your toothpaste is done, say, hey, you know what? I'm going to look for fluoride-free toothpaste that doesn't have any SLS in it. Good. And then you go. Once you find something you like, that's your toothpaste, right? Same thing with deodorant, with shampoo, with whatever else. So I think that, because we're creatures of habits, I think that that's a great way to do it that's not overwhelming. I think that when it comes to actual detoxification, so the process of detoxification, if you're going to do some kind of semi-intensive program, usually those are anywhere from, I would say a week to 30 days, give or take. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Ken, I know you mentioned supplementation. Do you have a supplement that you'd recommend for detox?
I don't really have one that would be a particular brand. I mean, you can go online, and a good health food store has more than enough of what you need. But the thing is, it's like taking responsibility for your health and actually going out and researching. And, we have the internet now. You can find out whatever you want to know off the internet, and it takes a little bit of work. But but you got to take that responsibility, and it takes effort, and it probably costs a little bit more money too if you're going organic, and also changing out the various things that you use. So but it requires effort on people's part, because if you don't put the effort in, and of course there's also things you need to do like good sleep too, and then I mentioned the exercise before. All of these, and also a good mental state. I mean, frankly, turning off your television is probably the number one thing you can do. I mean, it's just pure porn 24/7. So getting that stressor out of your life can just do wonders for your mental attitude.
What about a little super antioxidant called carbon 60? Can that help support detox?
Oh, it definitely. C60 helps support detox. And especially when you start dieting, or maybe doing intermittent fasting, you're starting to dump your fat supplies. And those fat supplies are full of all kinds of toxins that have gone in there. And C60, and it's not necessarily the toxins that cause the problem. It's as those toxins break down, they produce oxidative radicals. And those oxidative radicals go out, and that's what's doing a lot of the damage. So when C60 is like one of the most powerful antioxidants known, and part of its ability to replace itself. It's like a little molecule carbon, 60 atoms. And it stores, and how it kind of does that, it pulls hydrogen ions from the environment, stores it on the inside of its cage-like structure, and then when a negatively charged oxidative radical, which is a free electron basically on it, sticks to it, it'll release one of those hydrogen ions, and like, for instance, it'll turn a hydroxyl radical back to water, or it'll superoxygen, it'll just steal the electron, and it'll go back to regular oxygen, or it'll bust peroxynitrate back into oxygen and a nitric oxide. So that's one of the key things about C60. It just resets itself again and again. It doesn't have to go through a bunch of biochemical processing, like maybe vitamin C or other antioxidants that your body makes. And it also doesn't interfere with the signaling molecules, which is really important, because you need nitric oxide. You need some other reactive oxidative species your body uses for signaling. And they're based on like sulfur, iron, and zinc, but they're lower energy. C60 doesn't interfere with any of those. And that's kind of its great secret.
That's awesome. So all right, let's say I've decided I'm going to start detoxing. Brett, I'm going to take your advice. When I get done with my toothpaste, I'm going to choose a different toothpaste that doesn't have fluoride in it. I'm going to look for shampoo and hair care products that are paraben free. I'm going to look for aluminum free deodorant. So I'm probably going to get rid of my antiperspirant. And I'm going to change my diet. I'm going to, shift gears. I'm going to do my best to reduce alcohol and sugar. And I'm going to replace processed foods, and I'm not going to eat fast foods. And I'm going to try to, buy organic when I'm, eating fruits and vegetables and wheats and beans and things like that. What might be some of the side effects, Brett, that I might go through during this 2 to 3 months, maybe 4 months, maybe I just go on a journey for all of 2021 and I decide I'm going to clean up my life. I'm going to be focused on not getting sick, and I'm going to really optimize my immune system. What might I expect as I start to shed fat and let go of these toxins? What might happen to my body? What might be some of the maybe perceived negative effects of what I might go through?
Well, I think there's a couple of points that we should probably preface all of this with. There's two ways to detoxify, right? Okay. And the analogy that I always use is, can you imagine if I had 50 people in this tiny room, and these are the toxins, right? And I said to them, all right, everyone, we're all going to leave at the same time. Okay. All right, everyone's going to break the door down. Some people are going to get trampled. There's going to be chaos, right? It's going to be pretty awful to be in this room if that's what's going on. So that's the type of detoxification where people are forcing detoxing, right? So it's kind of like getting in there, quick and dirty, high doses of certain nutrients, and really trying to force detoxification. The other way is more low and slow. So if I said to people, these 50 people, I said, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to actually just put your name down on a list. And what we're going to do is everyone's going to leave. When I call your name, you're just going to walk out the door, right? Yeah. No problems. So when you do a low and slow approach, like we're talking about, where what you're doing is you're really lightening your load by removing things first.
I like that.
And you're doing it in some kind of process, right? So it's not all happening at the same time. Because what I found with people is if you do it all at the same time, it's overwhelming and it's very difficult to do. And oftentimes what will then happen is people just won't follow through, right? They'll be like, well, whatever, it's too hard. So that's all of that said, I think that if you go the approach that we've been talking about, you're probably going to find very minimal side effects. To be quite honest. And I think the only side effects, air quotes, that you're going to find are probably going to be very positive ones. So initially what might happen is you might have some withdrawal, okay, particularly from the dietary side of things.
So sugar addiction is a very real thing. Yeah.
I always tell people you crave your poisons. So they're kind of like, well, how do I crave my poison? That seems weird. And the short answer is every time you eat something that is perceived as a poison, your body actually produces endorphins to counteract the pain, right? So just like you get high when you go running or you do exercise, it's the same thing. If you keep eating, cheese over and over, and your body's sensitive to cheese, well, you actually get hooked on the cheese because you get hooked on the endorphins, right? So what you'll find with a lot of foods, dark chocolate might be another one. Not that I have a problem with dark chocolate, but nonetheless. So I think the only thing that's going to happen is there's going to be that withdrawal period, but the withdrawal period usually only lasts for a few days to a week. Like caffeine withdrawal, for example, right? So if you decide that you're going to go caffeine free, you might have 1 or 2 days where you don't feel good and you got a splitting headache. But after that, you feel pretty fine after that. From there on out, I mean, it's all good. And I always say to people, I'm like, health is not an event, right? It's a habit. Okay, and I think a lot of people make that mistake is, we're going to just do this over here that's not serving us. And then once a year, we're going to have 10 days where we're really good. And then we're going to go, oh, wow, that was great. And then just go right back to what we were doing. Yeah. So health is not this, got to get to the top of the mountain. And then once I've made it, hooray. And then that's it. It's not a race. Right. It's really a marathon in that sense where we should really be cultivating better habits for ourselves. And I think that once you've made these changes, it's not going to be a year-long detox. It's actually going to be a lifetime of detoxification where you minimize your exposure.
I love that. Ken, do you have anything else you want to add here on the detox front?
Oh, no, that's really important. All of what's been said. It's just that, like for C60 just gives you that little edge that you have, so that when those toxins come out and they start breaking down, you can, when the C60 can neutralize those oxidative radicals. And also C60 is, when people first take it, a lot of times C60 appears to turn heavy metals, usually heavy metal hydrides, back into metal oxides, which your body can actually grab and dump out. So we've had, like, when people first take it, they got a lot of mouth metal mercury fillings. They'll get a metallic taste in their mouth.
Really?
For the first few days, and then it goes away, and then they start seeing the health benefits. So, and that's another thing that we have, that people should think about, getting the toxic metals out of their mouth if they have mercury fillings, and then also avoiding things that have toxins. And one of them, as we mentioned before, is the fluoride in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a very important one, because fluoride's a very active chemical, and it grabs stuff, and it'll also messes up your thyroid functioning. So it's another thing that you really need to get out of your body.
Wow. Well, I think we could do probably a whole show on dental health and mental health and water. So I'm going to make note of that, and we'll talk about that again soon. All right. I want to shift gears a little bit, because Brett, you're going to have to help me with this. I learned about iridology, and I think I'm mispronouncing it, because
iridology.
Iridology. Okay, thank you. I learned about it about 15 years ago, and I am fascinated by this. I understand it as basically like if there's a map in our eyes, and if you look at the eyes, you as an expert in iridology could understand maybe some deficiencies that I might have been born with or inherited. That's how I understand it. And so, like, if I had a weakness in my liver or my kidney, that might show up actually in the iris of my eye. Is that what it is? Can you talk to us a little bit about what iridology is?
Yeah. So, I mean, iridology has really been around for around 300 years, maybe a little bit more.
Okay.
The way that it was actually discovered, just to give you a quick backstory, was the guy, I forget his name, was some crazy European, German, Belgian names. I'll botch it completely.
Okay.
But basically what happened was there was an owl that fell out of the tree, and the owl broke its leg. And what he noticed, he didn't realize at the time, but there was a black line in the iris of the owl's eye.
Wow.
Okay. And so then what happened was he nursed the owl back to health. And once the owl's leg was fixed, the black line was gone. And so that kind of like, that's the birth story, if you will, of iridology. Okay. And, if you look at ancient healing modalities, they always say the eyes are the window to the soul, right? Mm-hmm. It's a very spiritual phrase. And we now know that it's a map to the inside of the body as well. And so from an actual biological standpoint, what you'll find is you've got about 1 million nerve fibers in each eye. And so they sit on these rods that kind of come out of the eye, mm-hmm. and then they're attached to your brain on these two stalks. And from there, they're essentially hardwired to the rest of your body. And so what you'll find is each of these 1 million nerve fibers are actually essentially giving not real time, because there's about a 6-month delay, but it's giving this feedback from what's going on inside the body by way of the nerve fibers. So if we see, for example, that an organ might be inflamed, you'll see the fibers turn very white. If we see that there's degeneration, what you'll actually see is the nerve fiber itself, it kind of recoils, and you get this hole on the map. Right. Okay. So there's a lot of positives with iridology, and then there's also some limitations, like anything else. Right. So iridology is really, it's a non-invasive analytical tool. It's not really a diagnostic, right? So I stop myself short. I would never say to someone, looking at your eyes, you have B vitamin deficiencies. You know, I might see that your pancreas is weak, and I know that your pancreas needs B vitamins, but we can't really say, how deficient are you in something, right? So it's really a good tool to evaluate inherent weaknesses, as you said. These are things that are passed down the genetic lines. We can see organs that are maybe weak, organ systems that are weak, inflammation in the body. We can also see toxic deposits, if you will. And again, that might be controversial to some people, but we don't know what those toxins are. Okay. And some things, maybe like a cholesterol ring, I could probably tell that you're eating too much salt. I could probably tell that your cholesterol is being oxidized. So there's certain things like that we can tell. But I think the most important thing that I would, tell anyone who's thinking about getting into iridology is you need to use iridology together with nutrition. Mm-hmm. or with something else, right? Because can you imagine if you took your car to the mechanic and they said, oh yeah, the spark plugs are no good, the tires look a little shoddy, and yeah, the seats looks like you got another month left in the seat. Well, can you fix it? No, sorry, I don't know. I don't know how to do that, right? I can just tell you what's wrong.
Right.
And so I think that, because I do find some people just practice iridology only, and they don't really have a good handle on what to do with the information.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it possible that if somebody went on a journey of detox and really focusing on supporting their gut health, might their irises change like over a period of time? Is that a potential outcome, or is that
that's a very controversial question, and it's actually been asked quite a bit in the iridology circles. So there's two camps. There's the camp that says yes it can, and there's the camp that says no it can't.
Okay.
I think that what I've experienced for myself many years ago was I was doing a lot of work on my liver. I was doing a lot of acupuncture and stuff like that, and I actually started seeing healing lines come in because I'm looking at my own eye, right, with a magnifying glass. So I could see healing lines were actually coming in, and those nerve fibers were starting to kind of regenerate. Okay. But I would say that, you look at the godfather, if you will, of iridology, Dr. Bernard Jensen. I was mentored by one of his proteges. So I'm trained in two different types of iridology. And Bernard Jensen, just a legend in the nutrition field. He's one of the top 3 of all time. And this was a man who saw 350,000 patients in his day, and wrote 70 books. Mm-hmm. And he was able, over many years of working with someone, to actually change the color of the eyes, right? So if someone had more, due to toxicity and acidity and whatever else, if the iris was more of a darkish kind of blue, he's got before and after pictures where you can see the brightness in the eye is right there. But I think in modern times, with all the things we spoke about before, stressors, toxicity, etc., I think it's a lot harder to do that nowadays.
Yeah.
We're just living in a different world, and unless someone's got some serious staying power where they're going to stay on a protocol like that for 4 or 5 years, you're probably not going to see that.
Yeah. So if any of our listeners are interested in further exploring iridology, what types of questions should they be asking when they're looking for a practitioner? I mean, what I just learned from you, which was new news to me, was that, some of these folks might only be able to give you insight, but not tell you what to do next. So what kind of questions should our audience be asking if they want to explore this further?
I mean, I think the number one question would be, does the practitioner do other modalities as well?
Okay.
In other words, are they a naturopathic doctor? Are they a nutritionist? Do they have something else going on? Because, truth be told, you can go to, you can go to institutes and you can study iridology and you can get it all done and dusted in 6 months.
Okay.
You can have a certification with no background whatsoever in healthcare.
Wow. Okay.
So, you kind of have to look at it that way. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably the big one. And then again, if you're asking questions, I would just ask the person, what recommendations do you make for your clients or your patients once we have a report or once we have an analysis? What do you do after that? What do you do with people? And if they don't have good answers as to the strategies and tools that they would do, if they're just trying to load you up with supplements, I would probably steer clear of that person, because really it's looking at a much larger field of vision with that modality.
That's awesome. Thank you. Okay, so I've learned a lot today. I really appreciate you guys both being here. In terms of detox and supporting gut health, we've learned to reduce sugar, alcohol, replace processed foods with whole foods, seek out organics when we can, make sure that we're drinking plenty of water, get exercise, get lots of sunshine, all that stuff's important. Brett, for people right now who are focused on not getting sick in the first place, what are the top 3 things you recommend people do right now today that are simple and easy that they can integrate into their lives?
I mean, again, the sugar is probably the biggest one. That's every single practitioner, every single person on the planet can probably agree that too much sugar is a bad thing.
Yep.
The average North American now is consuming 146 pounds of sugar per year, believe it or not.
That's probably gone up.
It's more than some
over
people
this last year too.
Yeah. So I think cutting out the sugar is one thing, and that's going to just have a ripple effect of so many different things, right? I think the second thing, which we haven't even touched on at all, yes, eating clean and doing all that stuff, but really balancing your blood sugar. right? So balancing your blood sugar. And of course, when we cut sugar out, your blood sugar is going to start to get, sorted out. But coming back to what Ken was talking about, the intermittent fasting, I mean, I think you have to work into that. But just from a ground zero perspective, keeping the carbs kind of in the background, focusing on the proteins and good fats, healthy proteins, healthy fats. Because once you stabilize blood sugar, your risk factor for metabolic syndrome, for heart disease, for diabetes, for all of these things, for Alzheimer's, all goes down like dramatically. Sometimes as high as a 75% risk reduction, which is huge. So I think that's one. And then the third thing I would say, I mean, I think with everything that's going on in the world today, if I was to pick not necessarily one supplement, but something that has the research behind it, would be vitamin D. There's just there's a vitamin D epidemic, like a deficiency epidemic right now, and obviously we don't have time to get into why that is, but the short end of the story is that we know that vitamin D influences 5,000 genes in your body.
Yeah.
So when your vitamin D levels are rock bottom, who knows what's going to happen? You know what I mean? But we know that it's so important for immunity. We know that it's important for mental health. We know that it's important for, for bone health. I mean, the list just keeps on going on and on.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll say, and obviously, we're here today, we're talking about carbon C60. I'm a huge fan of when you look at nutrition, is thinking about core nutrition, right? So there's a lot of supplements on the market. I think people are taking way too many supplements. They're just taking things they don't need. But I like to look at things that are broad spectrum in their action. So if you can take something that's more lower dose, and I know C60 doesn't really fit into the dose paradigm, but taking things that work on multiple levels and serve to support your foundation in the long run, that's really where you want to be. And so that's why I love things like greens powders. I love trace minerals. I love, C60 is another great one. And that's why I've started incorporating it, because these are things that can be taken long-term. They're not like high dose or high potency and really stressing out your cellular mechanisms. They're low and slow. Low and slow. So if you change your lifestyle, if you change your diet, and then work your way onto core nutrition, I think that's a great maintenance plan for forever, to be honest.
That's great. Ken, what about you? What are the top 3 things you'd recommend for people to do that are simple and actionable in order to support people not getting sick this year?
Well, the first thing is, it's the vitamin D thing, but it's really getting out in the sunshine. Like go out and exercise outside. It's easy to do. You're getting your vitamin D, you're getting your exercise. That's really important. And I don't know, the others I think is checking out your water supply, filtering your water. And also you can get filters on your shower because, it's not just the water you drink, it's also the water that you bathe in. And so that's really important. And they have those things out there. And of course, I'd also say take your C60 because that just gives you it's just because you're never going to be perfect. Look, you go out to eat. Well, who knows where exactly that food was? It's probably got some glyphosate in it. It's got who knows exactly, and you're never going to be perfect. And that's one of the things also, don't aim for perfection. That's because you're always going to be failed. And so that's kind of C60 kind of covers, a multitude of sins. And that can help you, achieve health without go over stressing.
I love to say, let's focus on progress over perfection. It's a lot easier to achieve. So Brett, one of my favorite things that you said today was health is not an event, it's a habit. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us and all your wisdom. This has been a fascinating conversation. I thank you both for your time today. Brett, I know that you've got a special offer for our audience, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about it and who it's good for.
Yeah. So, I mean, I really do 2 things in my career. I don't work with a lot of products and that sort of stuff. I mean, I love working with you guys, obviously. But I help practitioners and I help patients, and that's really it. So, in clinic, my kind of wheelhouse, if you will, and the things that I'm really good at are helping people with digestive issues, autoimmune disease, and hormone imbalances. And I find that all three of those things actually go together.
Yep.
So if anyone here is listening and you have autoimmune disease, I'll tell you right now that you also have gut health issues and you also have hormone issues. Okay. If you have hormone problems, you also have gut health issues. Okay. So I find, I've wrapped those things up, and I've got a concept, or I don't even know what to call it, but I call it harmonic health. And harmonic health is really about focusing on the things that you need to focus on, supporting your weaknesses, and not focusing on the strengths as much. Right, just like an orchestra plays, sometimes the cello is soloing, then it's the singer that's soloing, then they're playing together, right? And then the trombone comes in, and so everything is fluid all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so identifying where those areas that need to be work on those, and ultimately you raise the whole vibration and move someone forward. So if anyone wants to work with me in clinic, again, you can go to my website. I'm sure there'll be a link below the video, and then. And then practitioners, I've got a digestive health masterclass. It's a very robust masterclass. I wrote a book to go with it. And basically that's all of the protocols, the tips, the menu plan, supplement protocols, the whole thing. And that's really, we've got a great little group of about 120 practitioners right now. And we're actually relaunching this come end of April. So so if anyone wants to check that out, again, you can just go to my website, or you can go and check out holistichealthlive.com. And if you are a more advanced, non-practitioner, let's say biohacker or something to that effect, you'll obviously get a lot of value out of that. Okay. But it is a true masterclass. It's pretty sciencey, and it's very much oriented to the practitioner.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I just want to clarify one thing for our viewers. If people are interested in literally doing the deep dive with you, this masterclass is that opportunity to do that, correct?
So the masterclass is actually more teaching practitioners how to help other people in their practice. Okay. If you want to deep dive with me, you can just go straight onto my website and just hit clinic, and you'll see exactly what's on offer there. I usually bring people on depending on the situation. I usually work with people for 6 months intensive, because transformation takes time. And one thing that I pride myself on is I'm very much there for people. Mm-hmm. So I don't work with a lot of people at once, but the people that I work with, I'm available. I take time. I listen to people. I take care. And I probably am very different in that sense than most other practitioners who are doing 5 minutes, half-hour appointments. I spend a lot of time with people over that 6 months, because we really need to shift mind, body, soul. You got to move all those things forward if you want true transformation.
They're all integrated. And I love that you remind us transformation does take time. So be patient with yourself and your process, and seek progress over perfection. We will make sure to link Brett's offer for his masterclass and his website below in the show notes. So if you guys have any questions, you can feel free to check that out and get in touch with Brett directly. Brett, Ken, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate both of your time.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.